Good evening, humans. Tonight I have a scary urban legend from Indiana based on true events. Here is the story. The green-clawed beast. I don't swim in the Ohio River anymore. I don't stand on its banks or throw stones or let my nephew skip rock into the brown shin of it. I don't even drive across the bridges without checking the rearview to be sure the water isn't rising behind the car like a bad thought. People think I'm being dramatic. They didn't pull me out. That August, the heat was the kind that rotted fruit on the tree and sent good people looking for shade that didn't exist. My girlfriend then, Amy, lived a mile from the Evansville Bend. We were both 22. Full of the kind of stubborn optimism that drops you straight into danger with your eyes open, she wanted to float the afternoon away. Rope swing and a battered inner tube between us. The river smelled like pennies and wet bark. Cicadas laid down a feverish hum in the cottonwoods. You ever think about how many towns use this thing like a drain? I asked because I was the kind of idiot who always had to say the one sentence that soured the lemonade. And he kicked a foot through the water. You ever think about kissing me and shutting up? So I did, and the world was simple again. We kept to a cove where the current folded back on itself and the water was wrist deep near shore, shoulder deep out farther, dark as tea wherever the silt lifted. Barges passed far out toward the channel, so slow it seemed like the river was carrying them against their will. Past the tree line you could hear the town creak, the low, distant industrial loneliness of the place that produces more than it consumes. We were laughing, and Annie called me a coward for yelping at a fish that brushed my leg. I called her brave for trusting the river at all. Sunlight came surf thick through the leaves. Dragonflies wrote cursive over the surface. I remember thinking how beautiful the river looked, and then I remember pain. It didn't feel like a cramp. It felt like a decision. Something gripped my calf, not wrapped, not coiled, gripped and pulled. My face went under. A green-brown turned to a roof. My breath vaulted out of me without permission, and he grabbed my forearm. Nails like lights in the blur, but the pull from below was patient and strong, a machine that had learned to wait for the night, that had learned to wait for the right moment before chewing. We never talked about how loud water is when you're under it. The world shrieks. The river filled my ears with torn silt and sand. I kicked, found nothing. I clawed at the pole and found texture. Not scales, not skin, something between, slick and pocketed. Like rubber left in gasoline, my fingers sank and came away buzzing, a sting that ran up the tendons and made my elbow go confused. The second yank left my head 6 inches below the surface, far enough that the volume of the world died and the light narrowed to a rectangle above me. I saw Annie's face up there, distorted by water, eyes wide and animal. Her mouth made shapes I couldn't read. Then her hand disappeared and I went down. There is a calm that comes after panic, and it is more terrifying. Your body decides fine, it stops screaming and gets to work. I pinwheeled, grabbed for anything. Root, rock, the memory of land. The river kept offering me silk. The thing's grip slid to my ankle. It squeezed, bones made unhappy sounds. My other foot grazed a log, and I shoved off with a kick that ran up through my hip. For 1 second I was moving up instead of down, and I put that second in the bank. The thing pulled again. Something changed. It wasn't strength. It wasn't that I outmuscled whatever had me. It was direction. The pull jerked sideways, surprised, as if something else had bumped it. I floated free enough to steal a gulp of hot air and river stink. and in that heartbeat a pair of hands hooked behind my arms and dragged. Annie, she was standing on the submerged root, water like iced tea to her waist, her teeth bared, not like a scream, but like a dog warning something to back up and make better choices. She hauled and I kicked, and it felt like trying to tow a refrigerator with floss. The thing came for me. We lurched into the shallows and Annie let go to get better purchase. Her palm slid against my skin and she hissed like she had touched a stove. I saw why. A second later when my thigh broke the surface, a smear of green smeared across my leg where her hand had been. Not algae, not mud, it shimmered faintly, oily slick, and made the skin under it pucker like citrus. The thing gave one last angry tug. Annie grabbed a smooth river stone and smashed it against the water where my knee vanished. People will tell you you can't hit water. They're wrong. You can hit the thing just below it if you know where to aim. The stone met something that thumped and swam away insulted. I crawled onto the bank. The world went tiny. The sky dialed down. Annie stood over me, shaking like she had touched an electric fence. You're bleeding, she said. What is that? Where the grip had been, 5 long marks ran up my calf like a hand that never learned to stop growing. Not cuts, not bruises, discolorations. The green had soaked into them, and from those lines a numbness crawled up my leg like a cat you can't convince to get off you. I think we're going to the clinic, I said, because bravado is what you do when your body doesn't belong to you anymore. We staggered to the car while I wrapped a towel around my leg. Annie scrubbed her palm with creek water and tore the skin enough to make her swear. The green did not scrub off, it muted, that was all. At the clinic the nurse said, "Good Lord," she touched my calf with a pen cap, and the cap came away tinted. She had another nurse bring a camera. When the doctor came in, he stared at the marks, then at me, and then at the forms like he was trying to remember how to spell any of it. "Catfish don't do that," he said. "I don't think that was a fish," I said. "What was it?" "Wrong," I said, and Annie laughed once in a way that took us both apart. They gave me a tetanus shot. They put salve on the lines that pretended to help. They asked if I was dizzy or confused, and I said no because I wanted the day to go back to before. They were writing something that would turn into a bill when the lobby door opened and 2 men in suits stepped in from summer, like evening had walked into morning. They were polite. They had the kind of faces you forgot faster than you should. They introduced themselves as working with a federal office that handled certain river reports. They asked the doctor if we were up to a few questions and smiled a lot at Annie and at me, like they needed us to agree that everything had been nothing. They knew our names before we gave them. People jumped to conclusion with rivers. Suit 1 said pleasantly, "Turtles, gar, snags, it's all scarier under there." Suit 2 had a little metal case. He took swabs of my calf and Annie's palm without asking first, just to make sure there's no toxic algae, he said, not writing anything down as he said it. "You're with the Air Force," Annie asked, reading a glance she shouldn't have been able to read, "for algae." "Lots of branches share resources," Suit 1 said with a smile that forgot to include teeth. "They ask us to reconstruct the moment for them, our precise movements, the way the current felt, how deep the water was. They ask us to draw a simple map of the bank." When I hesitated, Suit 2 said, almost gently, "We just want to be sure no one else gets hurt." "We shouldn't have been out there," I said. "The current..." Suit 1 shook his head. "It's not your fault. The river has a way of playing tricks." He put down the pen and leaned forward like he was telling a secret inside a secret. "There was a similar report last night." Downriver, he said softly, you didn't hear that from me. A young couple. He drove himself home with scratches, said a hand grabbed his ankle, said it felt rubbery. He smiled again. You could see how these stories get out of hand. How is he? Asked Annie. Better, Suit One said, and it sounded like an answer from a test you failed no matter how you study. We just want to keep folks safe. He slid a business card across the table, blank. If you remember anything else, he said, sometimes details come back out of order. They left as quietly as they had arrived. The doctor exhaled like he had been practicing not to breathe around them. And he drove me home. We didn't talk. She kept flexing her hand on the steering wheel as if working out a cramp. That night I lay awake and watched the ceiling fan try to take flight. Every time it clicked, I felt the pressure again, a patient grip closer around bone and waiting for me to make a mistake. The next 2 days grew a story around us. On the radio, a local host laughed about summer river monsters and read listener calls with a voice that made the caller sound crazy or drunk. In line at the grocery store, a woman behind me said her cousin's friend got tugged under last year and came up with barnacles on him like the ocean had forgotten where it lived. My phone pinged with texts from people I hadn't talked to since high school. Yo, you hear about that green hand thing? A man at the gas station told me the river had always been hungry and that the bridges kept it from eating what it wanted. He said it like he was proud, and his palm blistered along the creases where the green had soaked in. The blisters weren't infected, just wrong. She tried vinegar, lemon, a concoction her aunt swore by that smelled like pickles in church. Nothing changed but her patience. She didn't want me to see her scratching at Rod, and the night I pretended not to. 3 nights after the river, I woke up to the sound of water. Not in the pipes, in the room, like someone had opened a faucet that ran on air. I sat up, Annie lay beside me motionless, eyes open, rolling back without committing. She wasn't asleep, she wasn't awake. The sound of water got louder, the air grew heavy and damp. A wall cloud pressed into fabric. The green lines on my calf itched so deep I wanted to peel the skin off with my teeth. Annie, I whispered, her lips moved, a thin trickle of something dark slid from the corner of her mouth, and the street light coming through the blinds, it didn't look red, it looked black-green, like oil used too long. I shook her eyes snapped forward. The sound of water stopped as if the room had remembered it was a room. She said I was a nook. I broke off, clapping a hand to her mouth. In the bathroom, she gagged up river water, not in quantity, not a flood, just enough to make the sink smell like the Ohio on a hot day. Thin threads of green ran through it. She rinsed and spit and rinsed again until the water ran clear and then sat on the edge of the tub, shaking. I dreamed I was standing on that rope, she whispered, but the water was above me. It was on the ceiling, and I could hear something walking on it. We slept with the lights on. The next afternoon, 2 minute suits knocked on the door like they were there to borrow sugar. They were not the same men, they had the same faces. How are you feeling? Suit 3 asked. He smelled lightly of the envelopes that hold hotel keys. Fine, I lied. Suit 4 watched our mouths move like he was tallying words for scrap metal. We'd like to take you to the river, he said, just to show us where exactly. No, I said it. It was the first easy answer I'd given in days. It helps, Suit 3 said. When the mind revisits a place, sometimes it can put things in order. I wanted order. I wanted it so much I could zip myself into it and never come out. And he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Something between don't and please. We went. The heat had not broken. The cicadas were having a party. None of us were invited to. The river looked irresponsible, broad-shouldered, and lazy, pretending it didn't make rules for towns. Suit 4 checked a watch that didn't have hands. Suit 3 smiled and asked us to point. We walked down to the cove. A rope swing hung like a tired sentence. The shallow sandbar had moved 2 feet overnight, as if the river had rolled in its sleep. Annie and I stopped where the water lapped the bank, like a dog that might bite. Here, Annie said. She raised her hand and showed them the green line that still thread her palm, like a vein someone had drawn on the wrong side of her hand. Suit 3 nodded like a nurse, pretending the shot won't hurt, and the direction of pull. Down, I said. Sideways, Annie said at the same time. Suit 3's smiles didn't change, and that was how I knew we had said the wrong true thing. A barge horn bellowed far off in the pause, after the river spoke just for a breath, with another voice. A sound like bubbles dragging a metal comb through themselves. Suit 4's head tilted, Annie's eyes glazed the way that had in the bedroom, and she took one involuntary half-step forward. I grabbed her wrist, cold raced up my fingers, cold that didn't come from temperature but from the absence of heat. The way a shadow is in the absence of light. She blinked twice, hard, but 3's smile thinned. You should go home now, he said gently. Stay out of the water for a bit. For how long, I asked. Long enough, he said. We did not talk for the rest of the day. Annie sat on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin, like a child with a fever. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall like a man keeping the door shut with his shoulder. At dusk, I got up and locked the front door, then the back, then the windows, then the basement, as if water respects locks. At midnight, the sound came again, walking on the ceiling. Annie grabbed my hand so hard it hurt. Her palm was slick and tingled. Don't open your eyes, she said. If you keep them closed, it can't. A massive weight thumped onto the roof, soft and deliberate, like a giant hand placing itself. Fingertip by fingertip, the house shrugged. The light swelled and dimmed like breath behind glass. A line of cool wet ran down the center of the ceiling towards the fan, hesitated, then followed the blade's slow rotation like it was thinking. Don't open your eyes, Annie whispered, and I didn't. And in the blink dark, I saw it anyway, not a shape, an impression, a presence pressed through fabric, a suggestion of a hand where water was like one. That expectation of fingernails in places that have no skin. It leaned down, the green mark on my calf flared heatless, and my mouth flooded with the taste like nickels and rot. Please, I said to it, or to God, or to the ceiling fan, we're not yours. A weight shifted, a wet palm the size of a dinner plate, pressed down through the air and set itself on my ankle, not crushing, claiming. I remembered the root under Annie's foot. I remembered the sway of the barge, the way the river had pulled sideways like someone answering to two masters. I did something stupid person would do. I sat up fast and put my hand against the ceiling where the damp line ran and pushed. The cold was enormous. It ran up my arm in a bit. My shoulder, like frostbite, invented a cure. For a second, my palm slid against something pocked and slick, and I felt the way you feel a big sign without hearing it. An anger older than the town and much less articulated. It was the anger of a thing that had always been fed and suddenly was being told to make new. No, I said, like I was telling a puppy to leave the trash. It sounded ridiculous. I pushed harder. The weight withdrew. Not scared, not hurt, irritated. The sound of the water stopped. In the silence that followed, we counted 100 together. Annie and I, the way kids count in the dark, so the space between numbers doesn't get ideas. At 100 exactly, a car passed outside the normal world, clearing its throat, and I could breathe again. In the morning, the ceiling paint peeled where my hand had been. When I touched it, my fingers came away green. We moved 2 weeks later, not because the suits asked us to. They didn't come back, not because the green spread. It mostly faded, leaving a sickle-shaped ghost in Annie's palm and 5 faint lines on my calf like something that had happened to someone else. We moved because the sound of water in a sink made us both flinch, because rain had a personality now and we didn't like it, because a map that includes a river is a map that includes a door. Sometimes driving past the bend, I'll catch a barge pushing at dusk and thinking about the weight of things under things. People still go to the cove on hot days. There are new ropes on the swing and Instagram proof of courage. Every summer a week will pass when folks tell each other on porches about something grabbing them by the ankle and a friend of a friend downriver who came up with paint on him he couldn't scrub off. The radio host laughs. It's always ridiculous until the ceiling locks. Annie wears a small silver bracelet now. It's certain like the metal looks a little green where it sits on her pulse. She says it keeps her from scratching when she is asleep. She says it reminds the body who it belongs to. Sometimes at night I wake up and listen for the faucet that isn't there. I listen for the wet palm flattening against air like it's remembering how to be a wall. On those nights I go to the kitchen and pour a glass of water and set it on the counter and watch the surface for a minute. It's always still, but sometimes there's a tremor, small, regular ripples from no draft moving as if something is breathing through the glass. Watching me watch it, I pour the water down the sink, I turn the tap off hard. I towel the basin dry, then I go back to bed and I dream of a brown-green world where light is a rumor and hands are older than bones. As something patient moves sideways under the surface waiting for mistakes. That's when I remember the suits and their polite smiles and how they smell like envelopes at open doors. I wonder if they come with buckets when the calls multiply. I wonder if there are files somewhere in the office that has a map of the river pinned up with colored strings, Evansville, Henderson, Owensboro lines that cross until they make a net. And I wonder who the net is. Did you find that scary?